Did these sound like the actions of a man who had all he could eat?
Apparently not, because he's eating a bird in this drawing. Meet Tarrarre, an 18th century French soldier with an appetite so big that he ate live eels, cats, and possibly someone's baby. Tarrarre was born around 1772 in Lyon, France. And we know only a couple of things about his early life. We know that he was a French peasant, and we know that his family got tired of him eating them out of house and home and kicked him out when he was pretty young. We don't even know if Tarrarre is his real name or a nickname based on the popular French saying at the time, Bon Bon Tarrarre. As a teenager, he roamed around the country and hung out with thieves and prostitutes. That was until he became a street performer for a traveling con man. Tarrarre didn't have an education or anything resembling talent. Actually, he was pretty incompetent, but the one thing he could do was eat, and that's how he made his money. He would gather a crowd around him and just chow down on anything they gave him. He ate stones, baskets of apples, and live animals, which kind of became his thing.
I will swallow anything, and I mean anything you people throw. Please, no more spark plugs.
His description is so weird that he doesn't even sound all the way human. When he was 17, he was average height but only weighed 100 pounds. He had an extremely wide mouth and lips so thin that they looked invisible. His teeth were heavily stained, and he had an unusually soft and fair hair. When Tarrarre wasn't stuffing his face, the skin around his abdomen would hang loose in folds, and his cheeks were wrinkly and loose on his face. But when he was in his element of being a big bag and eating any and everything that wasn't nailed down, his stomach would expand like a balloon. Tarrarre was a prime example of what would happen if everything went wrong in the human body. Not only was he weird looking, he just smelled awful. His body odor was so bad that people could smell him from 50 feet away. And for those unlucky enough to be next to Tarrarre when he was eating, the smell only got worse. And that wasn't the only thing wrong with him. He also suffered from chronic diarrhea, which was described as fetid beyond conception. And perhaps the strangest thing of all, the man never seemed to gain weight. In 1798, Tarrarre moved to Paris and continued with his act. He was pretty successful until he eventually suffered from an intestinal obstruction. He had to be carried off to the Hôtel Dieu hospital, where he was treated successfully with laxatives. He was so thankful that he offered to show his trick to a surgeon, M. Gerard, and offered to swallow his watch and chain. The surgeon threatened to cut Tarrarre open if he tried. When the War of the First Coalition broke out, Tarrarre joined the French Revolutionary Army in 1792. Unfortunately, the rations were just too meager for a hungry boy, so he would perform other soldiers' tasks for food. And all that extra work took a toll on Tarrarre, and he was admitted into the military hospital for exhaustion and granted quadruple rations. But that still wasn't enough to satisfy his hunger, and he began scavenging for food. He ate scraps and even snuck into the apothecary's room to eat their supplies. Watching all of this unfold were military doctors Courville and Percy. They were so fascinated by Tarrarre's prodigious appetite that they kept him in the hospital for experimentation. To test how much he could eat, they gave him a meal meant for 15 laborers that included 2 large meat pies and 4 gallons of milk that he completely devoured. Apparently, that feast was a one-time thing because he started eating animals. He was seen eating a cat alive by biting into its abdomen. The sideshow act from his earlier life must have put him onto exotic tastes because he loved eating a smorgasbord of animals that included lizards, snakes, eels, and puppies. Now, you would think someone like Tarrarre would be out of his mind and suffering from some sort of mental illness. But no, outside of his appetite and his looks and his smell, there was nothing unusual about him. The people that knew him described Tarrarre as apathetic and indifferent and, quote, a complete lack of force and ideas. When General Alexandre de Beauharnais found out about Tarrarre's appetite, he wanted to use the super eater for military use. The general, along with Doctors Percy and Courville, devised a plan of having Tarrarre swallow a small box in front of a gathering of generals of the Army of the Rhine. After successfully swallowing it in front of everyone, he was awarded 30 pounds of bull liver and lungs, which he then proceeded to eat in front of the crowd. Tarrarre's first mission was to swallow a small box with military information and give it to a captured French colonel that was imprisoned by the Prussians in Prussian territory. They went over the plan a few times, dressed Tarrarre as a German peasant, and sent him on his way. He was caught immediately. They really sent this man into Prussia, a German state, knowing full well this man didn't speak a word of German. Despite being whipped, he didn't tell the Prussians what his mission was. But after 24 hours of captivity, Tarrarre decided that maybe the spy life wasn't for him, so he told them everything. He swore to the Prussian commander that the box had vital information. The Prussians strapped him to a latrine, and 30 hours later, the box was recovered in the grossest way possible.
Oh, what's in the box?
To both the Prussians and Tarrarre's surprise, there wasn't some grand military scheme. The box contained a note that asked the imprisoned colonel to confirm that he got the box and to send the confirmation back along with any other information that'd be helpful. Tarrarre was whipped for a second time and made to go through a mock execution before he was dumped over French lines. He came back so traumatized, he begged Dr. Percy to cure him. Dr. Percy was up for the challenge and tried everything from tobacco pills, vinegar to painkillers. And in a true spirit of throwing poop against the wall until something sticks, he tried to fill him up with hard-boiled eggs. Unfortunately, nothing worked. In fact, Tarrarre's appetite became worse. He started sneaking into the butcher shop to steal leftover organ meat and regularly got into fights with stray dogs for scraps. He was caught drinking the drained blood from a bloodletting patient and once got caught in the act trying to eat a corpse in the morgue. While Tarrarre was staying at a hospital, the situation took a darker turn when a 14-month-old baby went missing. He was blamed immediately, and while it was never proven that he had even seen the child, it was the straw that broke the camel's back, and he was chased out of the hospital in 1794. Dr. Baron Percy wouldn't see his most famous patient again until 4 years later in 1798. He learned that Tarrarre was deathly ill and admitted into the Versailles hospital from the hospital's chief surgeon. Tarrarre told Percy that he swallowed the golden fork 2 years prior and thought his illness was because it had gotten stuck. This time, it wasn't his appetite that made him sick. Dr. Percy diagnosed Tarrarre with advanced tuberculosis. A month later, he suffered from exudative diarrhea, a condition where blood and pus is in the bowel movement. He died soon after. Tarrarre's body began to rapidly decay after his death, and due to the advanced state of decay, no surgeon wanted to do an autopsy. Not even Percy wanted to do it. The only one that wanted to solve the super eater mystery was a chief surgeon, Dr. Tarrarre. He wanted to know if Tarrarre really had a golden fork lodged in his stomach, but what he found was a scene out of a Cronenberg movie. Tarrarre's esophagus was so wide that Tarrarre could look all the way down into his stomach. The stomach was enormous, covered in ulcers, and filled most of his abdominal cavity. His innards were described as bathing in pus, and on top of that, his liver and gallbladder were abnormally large. In a country that's not traditionally known for bathing, the stench was so overwhelming that the autopsy had to end early. The golden fork was never found. There has never been a definitive diagnosis of what caused Tarrarre's behavior. It has been speculated that he suffered from hyperthyroidism, which can induce extreme appetite, rapid weight loss, excessive sweating, and fine hair. There has also been speculation that he had a damaged amygdala, which is a part of the brain that controls anger, sadness, and the perception of threats. Injuries to the amygdala in animals can cause a condition called polyphagia, which is a feeling of extreme insatiable hunger, though it can explain Tarrarre's bizarre appearance and smell. Speaking of whippings, check out this video here about 18-year-old Michael Fay getting caned in Singapore. His punishment was such a big deal that it caused an international incident.